Today is November 25th, 2001. Yud through Yud Aleph Kislev Tavshin Samach Beis. We're going Baruch Shem to a Vart for Yitzi Suskin family. We're going to Flatbush, and Mommy and I are driving together in the car. We're just getting into Brooklyn now, and it's in Rabbi David Cohen's shul is where we're heading. And I wanted to, Mommy had recently, between L&M, don't want to contradict you, Mommy recently went through some of her family history, and I thought it would be important to tape it, so we'll have a record of it for posterity. And there's so little left of the old country. There's so many things I would have liked to have asked Daddy Olam Shalom. Now, in retrospect, that I didn't think of asking him when he was here. So, the Simon Swansig, Mommy will be around for a long time to answer the questions. But I thought it would be a good thing to do this. Whoever's interested in the family. What city was your father from? Budapest?
No.
No.
Szilágy Somjó.
Okay.
It's a hard Hungarian
And where is that?
This is lately became Romania after the First World War.
Southern
Became
part
Romania.
of Hungary? Northern part?
No, this is like
East,
Transylvania, but it became Romania.
Okay.
After the.
Where is it as opposed to Budapest?
To the right. That is what is that? East from Budapest.
And where was your mother from?
My mother is closer to Budapest, and that was the real Hungarian town, TISAFYURED. Tisa happens to be one of the second biggest river in Hungary, the Duna and the Tisa, and that was near TISAFYURED, near that river Tisa, and it was near to a big city, EGER, that is the main city over there.
What year did your parents get married?
In 1920.
1920. How old was your father when he married your mother?
I don't know.
Okay.
And interestingly enough, both of them family name was Klein, and they weren't related, but Klein is a very common name. And they lived in Budapest. They married in Peshterzhebed, but is next to Budapest, is like here is New Jersey to New York.
Another next door.
Yes. And then they moved to Budapest and they lived there, and my father, Solomon, was a salesman. He was selling to the grocery stores pickled merchandise like cucumbers, pickles and sauerkraut and this type of merchandise he was selling, working very hard because he was traveling with a horse and carriage and wagon, and he was suffering from the weather, the hot from the summer and the cold from the winter.
You have to sit outside.
He used to sit outside, and I never forget he used to have boots on winter time.
Right.
And he used to take newspaper, wrap it around his foot over the stocking to keep it insulated better. Because the paper is very warm, it keeps you warm. And they had only 2 children. I was the older one, and 2 years, and used to remember exactly how many months.
Doesn't matter.
My brother was born. He was a wonderful person.
Stop 1 second. Okay. How much younger than your brother were you?
He was younger than I.
He was younger than you.
I was the older one, and he was 2 years. I was born in May 1922. He was born in February 25, 1925.
I thought you were born 23.
22.
Oh, I was born 23.
22. But according to my driver's license, I was born 27.
Excusez-moi. Okay. Now, you were telling me the story about your parents and your grandparents, and when somebody was walking and got murdered by the anti-Semitic.
Oh,
I want to hear that whole business.
My mother's parents lived originally in TISAFYURED, where my mother was born. But then they came up to the Peshterzhebed, where they had a grocery store. A grocery store is like you see it in the movies, how you call that, an old-fashioned...
5 and 10 or...
No, it's an underneath.
General store.
General store, right.
Western.
So my Gottelige grandmother, whose name I got, died from breast cancer. There is a story about her too, that...
All hour tape, keep on.
And Nebach, she was suffering very badly, and she didn't let to be operated on because she said she doesn't want to go to the earth without her disfigured. And her oldest child, there were 6 children in the family, a boy, a girl, a boy, a girl, a boy, a girl. And
that's your mother's...
My mother's sibling. My mother was the youngest daughter in the... And the youngest brother was in Russia, in the how you call it? Not labor, when they take the soldiers, what is it called? It's called something else.
Draft.
No, Tatala, when they take the trained soldiers, I don't know English.
Mercenary.
No, Tatala. He was in a Hungarian army in the First World War, and the Russians captured him, and he was a
prisoner of war.
Prisoner of war, thank you. He was a prisoner of war, and as my grandmother was never dying, she kept on saying, Rudy is coming, Rudy is coming. And at her Lvaya, car came that he's on his way. He escaped to China from Russia. Escaped to China, and he came after my grandmother passed away. But the card, but he writes that he's coming, and my grandfather threw it into the grave. He said, here his son is coming. And they said Shiva, the family, and then my grandfather got up from the Shiva. He was wearing I have a very nice picture of them, Leslie, I should give it to you. And my grandfather had to go to buy wood for the store, because they were selling wood also, heat for cooking. The stored wood, what they cut up?
Firewood.
Firewood. And he was walking behind, and that time, that was after the First World War, where the communists took over Hungary for a short while, and after the communists, the fascists came in, whose head was Horthy Miklós. And the fascist was really who taught Hitler how to start to do things against the Jews. So my grandfather was walking behind this truck, but was carrying the firewood that the Scots shouldn't steal it off, because if they steal off half, they had no profit left. And they called the Nazis, they called white, because the communist was red, so the Nazis were white. They came a white car, and they crushed my grandfather between the car and this wagon. And Nebach, a week later, they said that she went to the father now. So then, that's my mother and the whole family. Probably my uncle came by then to see Shiva, also from Russia, Rudy Bachi. And then there was the oldest aunt, I think, was married by them, but the middle one, whose name was Herminka,
Hermione,
how you call it?
Like a feminine form of Herman. Hermione is the name in English.
English, yeah, but Herminka was Hungarian. And she said she's not going to get married before my mother, she married off my mother. And then how is my father and my mother met? I have no idea. Somebody read the Shidduch, I assume. And they got married in 1920, December 25. And then they moved to Budapest. And then I was born, and then my Gottelige brother was born, whose name was Leslie. Leslie Klein. And he was such a good-natured person. He never had fight with anybody. And when I was afraid that your Gotzelge father will be angry that I'm late for the date, he said, oh, we're going to have such a big fight. He said, only come, one tree alone cannot burn. One person cannot have a fight. If you don't answer back, there is no fight. No fight. Yeah. And then he got me a job when I was 60 years old, not even 16. I became 16 in May, and March, beginning of March, I started to work for Glaser Company, where I met your Gotzelge father, who was the head bookkeeper there, and I was the office girl. And he could have made the biggest shit of him, and he probably would have made it. But came the war, and he helped us a lot. He got us some papers that was very helpful to stay in Hungary, because every time they wanted to send you out.
Right.
And he put me into, he knew more people, and he had a little bit of connection, and he put me into an orphanage where I took care of 40 children. And this made him idea that I probably will make a good wife. And that's why he married me. And let's stop it right
now. Okay, it's running.
Okay. During the Second World War, it was really a miracle that we remained alive, because they took us also to put us into the wagon. They took us to Budapest Jews all together. They took us out to a horse race place where they
Racetrack.
It's called the Peshterzhebed, and they let us stay there on the ground, and we lay down on the earth, and we were sleeping there. And Baruch Hashem, that night the border closed down, and they said, now you can go home. And that's how we remained in Hungary.
Right.
But
The
even then, no, the Russians came much, much later. But even then, I don't remember which day it was, but I'm sure there are books that
41
show
or 43?
45.
45.
Or 44 in the end. And a lot of people they killed amongst us, because when they took us there, they took us like you see people marching with their hands up and beating us and killing us. And they hit my dear father, who was a very strong man, and he hit him on the upper leg, and they busted a vein that he couldn't walk, so my mother and I, we carried him home. And then we had to move into the ghetto. My father, and then when they came for us, the Nazis came into the house, and they took us out like this with our hands up. And my father said to us very smartly, he said, nobody look at the other one, because we cannot help each other, but we can help each other if we take care of ourselves. So don't look what happens to the other one. Just take care of yourself.
Oh, no, I think it was this.
And a girl who lived with us in the same house, never my age girl, young girl, 16 years old also, they shot her hand and 3 fingers, never she lost from her hand. But she remained alive, Baruch Hashem. And Jewish people were laying around on the streets. And in a butcher's store, never, they hang up the Jews on the hook where the behemoth was hanging. Terrible, terrible, because the goyim are worse than the animals. Animals only kill when they're hungry.
Yeah.
If a lion is full, you can lay down next to it, don't bother you. But they have absolutely nothing from it, just the enjoyment of killing.
Yeah.
I said that to Mati, that I only knew 2 kinds of goyim. I still just know 2 kinds of goyim. One who kills the Jew, and the other one who looks on with glee.
Yeah.
He had to make a paper on it, and he asked me to elaborate on it whether it's when after the war, part of Romania, that was originally Hungary, was given to Hungary during the war. It happened. So my father went and bought up his father, who was alive and living with his third wife. My father lost his mother when he was 9 years old. Yolan Neni was maybe 6 years old, and Uncle Philip was 3 years old. So my grandfather remarried then with the 3 children, and the second wife died, and then during the war married the third wife, and my father took him up to Hungary, to Budapest, and they took us out to the Tatars all together. My grandfather was also out, but a different group, because from every street somewhere else it was, but we met him there. And then they took us away. No, I was working for a company, Glaser. How can you go? It's red light now.
You can help me as much as you want.
I know, but you shouldn't go.
Okay.
So
you're working for
Glaser, and they liked me very much. That's where I met Daddy.
Right.
My father got me this job. And Glaser liked me very much and said to me, "Annie, I want to give you a Sefer Torah. You save it for me." And I took home the Sefer Torah, but was just the scroll.
Right.
Not even on the tree, just the scroll. I took it to my house, to our house.
Parchment, no wood, and no cover.
No wood, no cover. And I took it, and they made a nice place in the top of a closet for it and covered it. And then they took us away. Everybody took a little bundle with them, a couple of nothing, just a little bit. That also the guy took away. But something he took, like a handkerchief or something.
To remember.
Not to remember, but you knew that you walk, you knew something, a scarf maybe. My father tied the Sefer Torah on his chest, and Baruch Hashem, the Sefer Torah remained, and then after we got back from the ghetto, we gave it back to Glaser. I don't know if Glaser, Lily, who lives in Eretz Israel today, if she has it, or they donated to somewhere, I don't know. And my uncle, the Yolan Nene, lived in Connecticut, Norfolk, Connecticut, and my father's younger brother, Uncle Philip, with a wife, Esti Nene, came out from Hungary and lived in Connecticut, here Yolan Nene. And then Uncle Philip died, and Yolan Nene came to move to Kew-Garney Hills, Queens, here. Yeah, very soon. She lived maybe, you remember, you were a doctor.
I was taking care of her.
Yeah.
I have a chart on.
Yeah. And she lived here, I don't know,
a few years.
A few years.
Quite a few years.
Probably 6, 8 years maybe, and then she died. They had the one and only child, Nabokh, also a very sad story, because they took him away to the first labor camp. And they sent him out for wood. And the Russians were nearby there, and the Russians shot him. It was winter time, and the other boys tried to bury him, and they couldn't because the ground was frozen. So they buried him partially, but one arm was remained outside, they told us. And Uncle Philip never found where he was buried. I thought that he was one and only child.
What was his name?
George.
That's my middle name?
Yeah.
So that was your cousin?
Yes.
So I think
we should make a point that because my godfather father saved the Sefer Torah with his body, he tied it over his body as he was carrying it in his chest. It was the Sefer Torah, and wherever we went, he took that, nothing else. That's why Hashem is so good to us and give us such a beautiful family, Baruch Hashem. Seeing Nachas tonight, we went to that work, and it's such beautiful kind of hara. We saw Yechezkel there with the 4 gorgeous little girls. Baruch Hashem, and he spoke very nicely because he said he went to the Aguda convention this last week, and he spoke for a short while, but he mentioned Zaidi. So I mean that he has in his Aguda's blood. He said, how come? He said, because Aguda with Mr. Press was so nice to save him when he was in trouble to get to the United States. And really we can thank Aguda and Mr. Press that we have such a wonderful family, Baruch Hashem. He said, so I feel like that I have to help Aguda and I have to get other people involved because it's such a wonderful organization. Yeah. Okay.
Here's some cute stories about Bobbi's mother.
Bobbi's mother, whose name was Louisa Klein. And as I mentioned it before, he was the 6th of the 6 children and the youngest girl. And she had to dance like the other girls were whistling. She wasn't too happy about it, but she says a couple of cute stories. For example, in Europe in the olden time, every woman baked their own bread, and they baked a big round tzipo, how you call it? It's a big bread, a big round bread for the whole week. And they never cut up the fresh bread. They always baked the bread before the old bread was gone, so they can eat the yesterday's bread. Because that way not so many bread was used up. The fresh bread was too fast, you understand? Yeah. So my 2 aunts, my mother's 2 sisters, had some friends who came over to the house, and my grandmother wasn't home. And they were talking, and there was a nice, beautiful big tzipo called the big bread. And they said, let's make some French toast. So they had a box of eggs, a basket of eggs, and the big fresh bread. So they sliced up some bread, and they broke up 6 eggs, and they beat it up, and they baked it, and they had some bread left over. So they broke 6 more eggs, and now they had eggs left. So they sliced up more bread. So there was no bread and no eggs left for the whole week. They ate it so well. Then it happened once that I don't remember exactly what happened with my mother, that a mosquito bit him or something, and his sisters wanted to help him. So they took vinegar and they bandaged her hand in the vinegar, and never her whole skin came off. They soaked the shmata in vinegar. Yeah. But she had the oldest aunt, whose name was Matilda, who was very, very handy. My grandfather has a seltzer factory, but meant is that they had those old-fashioned seltzer bottles, and they went from store to store or from house to house selling a box of seltzers. And they were going with a horse and wagon. There was no cars that time, and at least they didn't have. And many times people couldn't handle the horses because they are also temperamental, some horses. But they said Matilda always knew how to handle the horses. They have to brush down the horses and wash them, feed them. And she loved my mother very much because she was the baby in the house. And she was so handy. She used to make her a dress and hat and shoes. She made her sister shoes, everything. She was very, very handy. Never she is also ended up in Auschwitz. So did the whole family from my mother's side, except my mother remained alive. Whole family was taken from this Peshterzhebed, that was, as I said before, like a little town next to Budapest, and we were successful to putting them in wagon and put them to Auschwitz and burn them. Nice. Uncle Philip, who is my father's youngest brother, he was in Mauthausen and came back, and he came to the United States and lived in Norfolk, close to his sister Yolanne, and he opened up fix everything store because he was a very, very handy man. He used to be an electrician in Hungary, but when he came here, he didn't have I think you need a license to be an electrician.
Right.
He didn't have that, but he drove a car. You should know, he wasn't a young man. He was driving a car, and he was very handy, he can fix everything. So he had in Norfolk, Connecticut, a store, and that's how he made a living. He fixed people whenever they had a broken toaster or whatever, he fixed everything. I want to say about my Gotzelige mother that she didn't have a doctor's spark, but she was a very smart mother and she knew how to bring up children.
Yeah.
And if she said to us, come here, I want to give you a patch, we went over because we know if you don't go, we're going to get two. So she said to me, when I got married and I was in America and she was still in Europe, she said to me, my dear child, when you're going to have children, don't bring them up with your heart, only with your mind. So I said, Mom, how could you say such a thing? He said, you think you can take away your heart? Your heart will be there, but some people are bringing up their children like monkeys. They don't use their head. It's very important to use your head instead of giving in everything to the children and not to say what is right and what is wrong. And it's really very important by bringing up children. She was never angry when she gave us the patch. We deserved the patch, so we got the patch, but she wasn't angry. She wasn't hitting us because she was angry or nervous. Matter of fact, I hope I did the same thing with my children. And once your father, what?
He never hit us.
Yeah, I happened to hit you. Not you, but somebody else deserved this I did. You didn't deserve so many patches. And once it happened that Daddy said to Suri once, I never hit you, really, Daddy never hit you, but some people hit also. But he said, I never hit you, and your mother hit you when you deserve it. No. So they said, Suri answered Daddy, Daddy, when Mommy hits us, we deserve it. When you hit us, you are just nervous. And it happens that when Daddy was reading the newspaper, you could talk, he didn't hear it. That's men's nature, that when they do one thing, they usually cannot do two things. Only women can do 5 things at the same time. So anyway, Yidela couldn't say the SP or ST. So he had star and tep, or star and tep. So he was saying, Daddy, Daddy. I said, pull Daddy's shirt, so he will know that you're talking to him. So Yidela was maybe not 2 years old yet and said, Daddy, why don't you speak to me? And Leslie said when he was little, he said, "Excuse me, lady," when we were going on the street. I had to go across and somebody was in our way, so Leslie said, "Excuse me, lady, excuse me, lady."